Hey everybody, this is Perch. Let's get into it. Are we still doing World Under Doom? Is that event still going? I think that event is still going. No, I'm being disingenuous. Yes, the event is still going on. You wouldn't know it, but yes, the event is still going on. I really, and I'm saying this with all sincerity, because I do believe that on the whole, I am reading more comics I'm enjoying. I'm having a better time in comics, on the whole, than I was 5 years ago. I think comics are, but I don't remember an event that stumbled this badly. And I mean, it's terrifyingly just dead. It's weird. I've never seen an event. I mean, like I reference a lot in videos that Fear itself was a stumble, and it was a stumble because you had a bunch of mega events. You had Civil War, you had Secret Invasion, you had the all of the Dark Reign material that would come out. You had Siege, and those all sold really, really well. And then you hit Fear itself, and it just the wheels came off the bus at that point. As a shame because Stuart Immonen, I think, was on Fear itself, if my memory's right, and I love him. I just love that art. But anyway, I haven't seen events. Even things like Secret Empire and Civil War II, which were kind of much derided events. Um, I despite all that, this is it's dead silent. It's not like it's getting critique. So I mean, maybe some people at Marvel are taking that as a win. Nobody's complaining about it, but nobody's talking about it at all. The sales numbers are just flatline. But it ties into this question from a viewer. The viewer says, "What makes a good event?" He writes, or yeah, I'm gonna go with he. Based on the name, I'm gonna assume your pronouns is what I'm gonna do. He writes, Perch, I've watched a number of your videos where people talk about how there have been very few good events in the last 30 years. People often use phrases like return to status quo at the end, bad, and change the status quo, good. That doesn't really mean anything when most events are easily forgettable and clearly haven't done whatever good means. What do you think are the components of a good event in 2025? Can you give a more detailed example of what would be well received by the readers and was a longer term meaningful story? Okay, fair enough. I'll take a shot at it. And I'm sure a lot of you, viewers listening right now, you have your own ideas what makes a good event. So, would love to hear that in the comments below. But to answer the question, I think one big important factor, if it's going to be received well by fans or not, is how much are they paying for it. And it's not like, and by the way, this isn't really a how cheap can you go? It's how expensive are you going? What I mean by that is Civil War had a ton of tie-ins, and if you went all in and bought all that stuff, you paid a lot of money. But as I recall, the Civil War event and all the tie-ins was still half of the size of the event and the tie-ins for War of the Realms. And Civil War, comic fans still will complain about that event, but I think you'd be hard pressed to not say that was a success. That was, it spawned a movie. It sold incredibly well. You can not like the consequences of it, but it went well. But the more money and the more tie-ins and more of everything else you're putting onto an event, you're burdening it with needing to hit everything out of the park. It just gets to be tough. And this is one of the big disconnects between the publishers and the fans. The publishers will say, well, it's a core event that is what we're selling. The tie-ins are optional. And I know they maybe believe that, but that's not what the fans believe. The people who are buying the comic do believe the tie-ins are part of the package, even if they're not buying them. And, you have a collector's mentality, so there does become this baked-in irritation if fans, people buying know that they're not buying parts of this crossover. It creates a disconnect in their mind. It frustrates them. So you have to take that into account. But in terms of the story itself, to me, I'll try and limit myself to four. The four big factors of a good event today need to be, number one, you got to seed it in a bunch of titles, not just one inciting event. Like, for example, I'll use the current World Under Doom event, that was seeded in a different event, the Blood Hunt event, where Doom takes Doctor Strange's powers or his mantle as Sorcerer Supreme and runs amok with it. And that it happened in that event. It was quiet for a while, and then World Under Doom hit, and off to the races we go. A good event 2025 needs to be seeded in a bunch of different titles. And if you're going to be doing a big crossover like the X-Men, the Fantastic Four, the Avengers, Ghost Rider, whoever is all in this, then you need to start putting some hints, or at least some build in all of those separate titles. So when you bring the characters together, they're all coming from their own kind of gravity. An example of how this was done well once upon a time was Inferno. Inferno had a bunch of different things going on in it. You had the kind of revolt in Limbo that was happening in New Mutants. You had the Maddie Pryor stuff that was going on in X-Men at the time. You had Mr. Sinister kind of floating around and a bunch of different things. You had the Archangel storyline and other things that were happening in X Factor. So you had different things that were seeding into the events. When we brought all these comics together, they collided in a really powerful and memorable way. So you got to do some build. The build has to be more than one and done. And compare and contrast with things like, this was actually one of the complaints I had about Fear itself. You had Sin, the Red Skull's daughter, kind of try to find, this mystical artifact that was going to allow these hammers to come down and transform people. There's actually very little to zero build of that storyline, except in a prequel one-shot story building to this storyline. So that's not good enough. It needs to be built up in little moments. Number two, I think the event needs to have a heavy amount of cliffhangers. There's people who are writing events right now who are kind of treating it like it's a movie, and you've got a 3-act kind of aspect to it. And, an event doesn't work that way. And I think the 3-act structure fails in an event because, very specifically, comic books are stretched out. So an event, a 6-issue event, is going to be stretched out over 4 to 6 months. In addition, you have all the tie-ins or anything. You're talking about half a year for most of the events. And so the idea of a 3-act system in the comics doesn't play well. You have to put in more cliffhangers. You have to put in more things to drive the story. You do have to contemplate a every issue cliffhanger kind of mentality, or at least kind of dramatic tension to push people forward, to get people excited about the next issue, to feel like we're building. Now, parts of the 3-act system, you do need to build. So you do need your event to start strong. Marvel also got in this habit with a lot of their events where they'd have and DC did it too recently with that Absolute Power storyline, which I think flopped to some extent. You have a big event at the beginning that just fucks everything up. And then you kind of recover from there and lead to the big conclusion. And that structure has worked well for some things, but I think it's been overused, and it's, you could argue some of that was in Civil War with the, you had the town blow up and in reaction to it, but because that was, slightly off camera, some of that was, obviously explosion, but some of the fallout, there was a little jump there. In Secret Empire or Secret Invasion, you did use this structure. The first issue, it's like, oh shit, there's Skrulls here. We have all these other heroes, some of which we thought were dead. And, are they real? Who's here? And that worked because Bendis had been seeding the Secret Invasion storyline in both Avengers and New Avengers or Mighty Avengers and New Avengers, I guess, for some time. Like, it had been at least a 6-month build in both titles leading into this. So, it didn't feel like a bang kind of event, but Secret Empire did. Several of the comics that have come out have used this formula. I don't think it works. So you gotta have, you gotta break the 3-act structure, and you gotta think about it in terms of comics. 2, I think you need a lot of comics. As I wanted to do this. Anyway. The third thing, you mentioned the mail, but the event has to have consequences. You can't just put everything inside the box. Now, that doesn't mean you need to kill someone. It doesn't even mean you have to radically change the status quo. It just means that there needs to be some after effects. When the Infinity Gauntlet hit and Thanos snapped and a bunch of the heroes, 80s event, there was still aftershocks of that. characters who realized what it meant to lose loved ones, or there was an impact, and that is a pretty, I think, a pretty critical factor to if the comic works or not. You've got to show that all these big traumatic things that happened meant something. If you don't, it just I think it falls kind of flat. So there has to be some level of impact, and I think it is a trap if you think that impact has to be somebody dies. I think somebody dies is a cheat, and I don't think it's too easy to bring people back, so it just doesn't have any lasting impact. But teams should be changed. I mean, a really really easy one is that's when you want to do your roster shuffle for the Avengers or for X-Men or whatever else. And if you really want to have it be a big impact, don't relaunch the title with a brand new number one. Actually have it happen in the regular title, because it feels bigger that way. It actually feels like something meaningfully changed when you're doing that. So I think that's an important one. I mean, look at Secret Wars. You had the black costume of Spider-Man. You had the relationship of Kitty and Colossus separated. These aren't major things. Well, the black costume wound up being, but Kitty and Peter's relationship. This is hardly the A storyline in X-Men, but it still felt like there was a consequence then of what happened. The Thing staying around on Battle World, and She-Hulk taking a place on the team for a while. I mean, these are the kinds of things that while they did get undone later, it felt like the characters were wrestling with something. Like there was actually some big change. So I think that's a big important one. The last thing I'll round out what makes a good event: you need good art. So part of the event is the spectacle. The event is like a blockbuster summer movie. And so just like you need big, impressive kind of CGI battle scenes or whatever it happens to be, you need some big moment to occur, some big visual. You need really good art. You need, and there's certain artists I think that I love, but are not event level artists. I'll give you an old example. Mike Mignola, I think, is an amazing artist. I truly, truly love his art. I don't think you put Mignola on an event. It'd be look, if it's a kind of a horror event through the Hellboy universe, everything else, it's cool, but it wouldn't make a lot of sense. You need a certain art style that's going to really kind of sell that summer movie kind of feel. I'll give one that hurts me personally. I wouldn't put Walt Simonson on an event. That sounds crazy, by the way, because I'd put Simonson on everything. I think that guy is truly still has it and still doing incredible work. And I would just put him on Thor. Come on, just give us one more Simonson Thor run, or even one shot. I know I've given the idea in the past. Just do some one shots with classic creators. Go suck up your pride. Have John Byrne do a one shot Fantastic Four. Have Simonson do a one shot for Thor. Have Alan Davis do a Cap. Give us like a collection of 48-page stories that are from the legends that did a lot of these comics. So I got it. It's printing money. Whatever. I wouldn't put him on an event at this stage in the career, because I think he's amazing at character work and kind of getting into that Norse mythology and all the rest. And I think events need to have a kind of a slicker feel. Is my feeling. That sounds like a shitty thing to say. I like to say things that are harder to say. Let's go with that. But I think that's where you probably need your Jim Lees. That's probably where you need your Olivia Capil. I think that's where you need creators like that to do these events. It's just McNiven. I think there's a certain art style that lends itself to the event and makes it all work. But these are mine. Okay, that last one hurt a little bit. So what are yours? Let me know what makes up a great event for you, and throw it in the comments below. I'm curious what your things are. What's the painful one you don't like to admit to yourself? Let me know that too. And thanks for listening.